Hello, and thank you for joining us this afternoon for our debate between Nebraska's candidates in the 1st Congressional District. Thank you for spending part of your NFL Sunday with us. I'm Aaron Sandiford of the Nebraska Examiner, and I will be your moderator for this event. This debate is between Republican Congressman Mike Flood and Democratic State Senator Carol Blood. For the next hour, the candidates will answer questions from our outlets that partnered to host this debate. Beside me, we have a panel of journalists, including our hosts here at Nebraska Public Media News, the Lincoln Journal-Star, and KRVN Rural Radio Network. The candidates will be asked a series of questions and will each be given 60 seconds to answer. If necessary, we will offer 45 seconds for rebuttal. Under the terms of the debate, I can ask follow-up questions. The candidates will be given 3 minutes for opening statements. Coin tosses earlier today determined the order for the candidates. We begin with Senator Blood.
Well, good afternoon, Nebraskans. My name is Senator Carol Blood, and I am running to be your next representative in Congressional District 1. I'm a Nebraska girl born and raised. I was born in McCook, raised in rural Adams County, and raised my own family in Sarpy County. My husband Joe and I have 3 adult children and 11 beautiful grandchildren. Previously, I served 8 years on the Bellevue City Council as the at-large representative, and I'm serving my 8th and final year in the Nebraska legislature. For a very long time, I've been a community advocate and volunteer, especially for our first responders. I am running for the last time because Congress is in complete disarray. They can't even get together to pass a long-term budget. In fact, since 1974, they've only passed 4 long-term budgets on time. Since 1995, they've had 5 government shutdowns. To me, it's clear that hyperpartisanship has taken over and people can no longer get their work done. In fact, it's my understanding they only work 2.5 to 3 days a week, according to Senator Grassley's recent story in the Nebraska Examiner. I vow to protect Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid as we know it because that is a benefit that you worked hard for. I vow to protect Nebraska families because it's important that they have access to health care, to affordable child care, to housing, to mental health care. We know that when we lift up the middle class and they do better, that our whole economy does well. And we need to make sure that our seniors who want to age in place have the ability to stay in their homes and that our generational farms stay here in Nebraska where we can bring young people back to the farm. We need to make sure that people feel happy, healthy, and safe, not just in Nebraska, but across the United States. It's also quite clear that what's going on at the border also falls squarely on the shoulders of Congress. We know that they've not been able to pass a long-term budget bill that will properly fund the help that they need at the border. Instead, my opponent, unfortunately, has made jokes about it on his TV commercial saying, hey, we need a bigger wall, instead of offering solutions. It's not a joke. It's an important issue that needs to be addressed, and Congress is unable to do that. We need to make sure that we continue to support education because children, no matter who they are, what they look like, or where they come from, need to have access to education, and we need to embrace and respect the teachers that give the education to our children. Because we know that when we have an educated workforce in Nebraska and across the United States, then not only do our children do better in life, but our economy does better. And lastly, I will protect and defend reproductive rights. My opponent has supported an abortion ban and voted against IVF. I believe that those decisions are best made in the doctor's office between the patient and the doctor, and that women are people that I trust. I ask for your support in my race for Congressional District 1.
Thank you, Senator. Congressman?
Thank you very much, and thank you to our hosts that have us here today, our moderator, and to all of you watching and listening at home. For those that don't know me, my name is Mike Flood. I'm a husband, a father, a job creator, a small business owner, a lifelong conservative, and a very proud Nebraskan. I live in Norfolk with my wife, Mandy. I was born and raised there, and we have 2 sons, Brendan and Blake. 2 years ago, you sent me to Washington to fight for our state and the shared conservative values that we have, to turn the page on years of failed leadership from Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and Nancy Pelosi. You elected me to fire Nancy Pelosi, which we did, to focus on border security, to make sure our communities are safe and bring down prices, more than anything, to get America back on track. Now, we've made some progress, but it's no secret that the Democrats still have a very sharp grip on the White House and the Senate, and they're fighting us at every single turn. Because of their failed leadership, our border is still in crisis. Prices on gas, groceries, and housing are way too high, and government spending is out of control. Meanwhile, liberals like Kamala Harris and Carol Blood continue to support the same failed policies and bad politicians that got us into this mess. I'm fighting their extreme liberal agenda in Washington, working to find real solutions. My opponent has endorsed Kamala Harris, and she would be a rubber stamp for the Democrats if she goes to Washington, and that's bad for Nebraska. As your congressman, I've been fighting to protect the border, to make sure we don't offer amnesty to illegal immigrants, to cut taxes, make sure we slow and stop excessive government spending, to help farmers and ranchers, and to keep our communities safe. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the challenges we have as Americans and the solutions that are possible, and I hope we walk away from many of the bad ideas that my opponent has. With that, I thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to this discussion.
Thank you, Congressman. The debate's first question comes from Nebraska Public Media reporter Cassidy Arena.
Nebraska voters will face a pair of opposing measures regarding reproductive rights on the November ballot. What role, if any, should the federal government play in restricting abortion access in America? Congressman Flood, we'll start with you.
Well, thank you very much for the question. When Roe versus Wade was overturned recently with the Dobbs decision, we have an answer to what we have wanted for 50 years, and that is states to have the opportunity to make our own decisions. Back in 2011, with 44 votes out of 49, I passed the nation's first 20-week restriction on abortion. That common sense legislation survived until this year when the legislature changed that to a 12-week standard, which I support. I've signed the petition and will be voting for that first trimester measure on the November ballot. I think it's important to note, as it relates to federal legislation, it's hard to comment on something that we have not seen. But I want to tell you, I am pro-life. As opposed to my opponent, who has voted against banning dismemberment abortions, I am in the mainstream with Americans on this. She is in the extreme because she supports abortion up to and before the day of birth.
Senator, same question.
Well, there you go again. There's no such thing as abortion at birth. That is another scare tactic that we've become used to when Senator Flood is talking to us. What we need to remember is that we're talking about a health care issue. It is not a good thing to have a patchwork of laws on any topic across the United States. And what we are seeing now with these excessive laws are women literally bleeding out in parking lots outside of emergency rooms. Now, I think it's really interesting how Senator Flood, Representative Flood, continues to say what he believes about me. Here's what I believe. I believe in freedom. I trust women to make these important decisions. I don't trust male politicians to make these decisions because they are not doctors. And I believe in respect for human dignity and compassion, which none of this legislation that my opponent has discussed even talks about.
Just a brief opportunity for rebuttal. But obviously, both of you took shots at one another. Congressman, if you'd like to respond, and we'll give the same to Senator Flood.
Well, I think your record matters. You know, I've been a legislator for 13 years, 10 of those in Nebraska. I believe in states' rights. I believe that Nebraskans should have the choice to decide what, if any, the abortion restrictions are. But when you look at her record and the fact that she voted against a ban on dismemberment abortion, that is extreme. That doesn't even happen. It's against the law in places like Russia, China, and North Korea. So we talk about extremism. We have to look at where it's coming from. Like I said, I started with the line at 20 weeks as a member of the legislature, and I got plenty of votes from folks in both parties. That is now set after the first trimester. I think that's a common sense restriction. And I want to make clear, I do support exceptions for the life and the health of the mother and in situations of rape and incest.
Senator.
So you'll note that he didn't talk about IVF, which he did vote against. And what I think being pro-life is about is allowing people to make their own decisions about when and how to have their own families. And that is something that my opponent is clearly not in favor of. The bills that I voted against, that he keeps saying dismemberment abortion, what he doesn't tell you is that we are making doctors criminals in many of these bills that we're talking about. And because of that, we are losing OBGYNs, and we have clinics closing down across the United States in various states. And so do I trust women? I do. Do I believe that those decisions are made between a doctor and a patient? I do, because these are very personal, and every pregnancy is different, and every situation is different. And who are we to decide what is best for a Nebraskan? That happens in the doctor's office, not here at the podium, not making policy.
Thank you, Senator. The next question comes from the Examiner and focuses on immigration. Both of you have argued the need for the other party to do more to address aspects of federal immigration policy and law. What should your own party do better? And what action will you take personally to ensure it? Senator Blood, we begin with you.
Well, I think we start with the question when we say our own party. That is the difference between Mike Flood and Carol Blood. Don't get the words interchanged. It's Blood and Flood. The difference is that we've become very partisan, and we continue to point fingers and we continue to blame. The blame goes squarely on the shoulders of Congress, who are unable to pass a long-term budget to fund the resources. They're not listening to the boots on the ground. Instead, they're creating boogeymen, creating fear, and putting out misinformation, and making jokes about it on their commercials. We need to fund the boots on the ground. We need to make sure that we have more employees. We need to make sure that we have more judges that are hired, because those that are seeking asylum have 4 or 5 year waits and can frequently not even go back to their countries should they need to go back to their countries if we decide that is what happens, or stay in this country and be productive taxpayers. Pointing fingers at this crisis is irresponsible. It's not a Democratic problem, it's not a Republican problem, it's a Congress problem.
Thank you. Congressman?
Well, just to be clear, Kamala Harris supports amnesty for illegal immigrants. My opponent endorsed Kamala Harris. At the end of the day, that's not where Americans are. Americans don't want illegal immigrants voting in our elections. We're having that conversation right now as it relates to the continuing resolution to fund the government. As far as what Republicans can do that hasn't been done, that I would work to do, I support President Trump's Remain in Mexico policy. And as a member of Congress, I believe we need to take the power of that policy out of the discretion of the executive branch, and we need to make it the law of the land. If you want to apply for asylum, you remain in Mexico while your application is pending, so that whatever president gets elected and whatever promises they make to a subset of folks that they want to vote for them someday, they can't do it in America while they're pending their application. That's one thing that I think we haven't done yet that we need to do, is to support President Trump's Remain in Mexico.
Obviously, again, there was a little bit of crosstalk here. So, Senator, do you have any rebuttal?
I do. So my opponent clearly supports former President Trump. And again, continue to talk about ways that he can fix it, but he hasn't fixed it. Instead, they've pointed fingers, he's pointed fingers. It's really ignorant to talk about solutions when you never actually had those solutions happen. We know what needs to be done, and the first thing that needs to be done is pass a budget and pass a bill. If the border is so important, then get it done.
Congressman?
This problem is not President Trump's problem. President Trump had the border under control when he was president. President Biden, on his first day in office, signed an executive order that sent literally hundreds of thousands of people over the border in the first 2 years of his presidency. That's the reason we need Remain in Mexico. That's how the methamphetamine and the fentanyl and the sex trafficking, that's what makes the rest of America a border town. I visited the border 3 times. I've seen little kids dropped off in ravines with an address scotch taped to their stomach, saying, "Take me to South Carolina." That's the message we send when we have this open border that is prioritized by President Biden. It has nothing to do with President Trump's Remain in Mexico policy. That's all President Biden has to do, is to simply sign that order. And I think we'd see a change right away.
And now we will hear a question from Dave Schroeder at KRVN Rural Radio Network.
Both of you have alluded to this. Some say the lack of progress in Congress on legislation is due to the political rhetoric among leaders of both parties. How would you work to address that and get legislation moving forward? Congressman Flood, you will lead us off.
Well, I'm pleased to say that every bill that I have introduced has a Democratic co-sponsor. In my 2 years plus in Congress, I've passed 2 bills through the House, one with bipartisan Democratic support. Even the support of Majority Leader Chuck Schumer in the Senate, it was ultimately vetoed by President Biden. I am working in a bipartisan way to do that. And I think part of it is that I conduct myself respectfully and I respect others. And I think that's an important part of politics. And it's an important part of being an elected leader. Now, opportunities like this to spar on the issues, that's also important. I believe in facing the voters, letting them know where I'm at, and doing what I can to inform those that have questions about Congress. But as it relates to working inside Congress, you should know that a great majority of members of Congress are Eagle Scouts, or the kind of people that you'd want to break bread with. Just like any organization, there are people on both sides that are there more for the TV appearances than they are for the actual governing. And I think there's a difference there.
Senator Blood, same question, rhetoric.
Sure. I, too, have had a long list of bills passed with full bipartisan support, because that's our job, frankly. But I'm going to point out something that's really important. We can stand here and say we're bipartisan, but if we're constantly talking about party and saying words like liberal and conservative, Republican and Democrat, that tells me that person is not worried about being nonpartisan. The one thing that I have always prided myself in is putting people over policy, people over politics. I am one of the few senators that does not feed at the trough of the lobby. I don't even go out into the rotunda to talk to people. I ask them to text me if they want to know how I'm going to vote, and I'll let them know. I haven't gone to the breakfast, lunch, dinners, and cocktail hours that they give us daily in the Nebraska legislature, and I don't think my opponent can say the same. And that is because I have made an oath to stay nonpartisan. Because I don't care what your party is. I don't care if you believe somebody's liberal or conservative. It's about getting things done.
Thank you. Now we move on to a question about the Middle East from Lincoln Journal-Star reporter Chris Dunker.
The conflict between Israel and Hamas continues, and there is still a divide on America's place in the war. What do you believe America's role is in that conflict, and under what conditions do you think a ceasefire should occur? Senator Blood, you will answer first.
I think the number one issue when it comes to this conflict is that we remember that there are innocent bystanders. And it is our job to make sure that those people who have nothing to do with this conflict have the ability to be safe and protected. And that we do what we can as a nation to protect those innocent lives, protect those innocent people. When it comes to a ceasefire, we need to make sure that whatever our government does, that they keep that in mind and that they make a decision that supports those people, supports those governments to do better in the future, to make sure that we can move forward to peace.
Same question, Congressman.
I support Israel. I think America has no greater ally than Israel. And those animals from Hamas, those terrorists, on October 7th, they crossed that border and they slaughtered and they raped and they killed children and they took hostages. It was their 9/11 and it was disgusting. Put yourself in that situation had that happened to Americans. I support the right of Israel to retaliate, but more than that, to eradicate Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization that intentionally lives in hospitals and schools and intentionally puts children and civilians in harm's way. There is no way around this. We must support Israel. We must eradicate Hamas. Right now, Israel is fighting for our peace as well in the Middle East. They deserve our unfettered respect and support.
Senator Blood, obviously the congressman talked a little bit about Hamas. What did you want to address on that topic? And I'll come back to the congressman as well.
So again, there's no disagreement that what's happened is horrible. But we need to make sure, which we are not doing right now, that we protect the innocent people that have nothing to do with this conflict. And so we can stand here and talk about the horrors, and it is a horror of what's going on in that conflict. But what we never hear Congress talk about are the innocents, are the people that are being murdered on a daily basis on both sides. We have to protect the people that have nothing to do with this conflict, that just happen to be living there and trying to survive and provide for their families.
Congressman, similar question for you. Obviously, your opponent has talked a lot about the civilians that are caught in the crossfire in the Gaza Strip and in other places. Talk a little bit about what you didn't get to address on that.
Well, either you stand with our greatest ally, Israel, or you don't. That's the question. I stand with Israel. America stands with Israel. Hamas is a terrorist organization. War is horrible. War is not fair. War is an abomination. But there is no choice when a terrorist organization full of rancid animals like Hamas did what they did on October 7th. They must be rooted out. Otherwise, they will move to another area of the Middle East, and using their Iran backing will be back again. This is much bigger than Hamas. This is Iran. This is the country of Iran funding Hezbollah and these terrorist organizations because they don't believe the Jewish state should exist. You either stand with Israel or you don't stand with the Middle East peace, because it's that simple.
Thank you, Congressman. Now another question from the Examiner, this one on taxes and spending. What steps, if any, do you think Congress should take to preserve the future of Social Security and Medicare? And why are each important? Congressman Flood, we'll start with you.
Social Security and Medicare are promises that we've made to Americans. I often argue that Social Security is not even an entitlement because it's owned by the people of America as they pay in at their jobs over the course of their career. We have made a promise to people that are at retirement age and those nearing retirement age to make sure Social Security is there for them. As it relates to the Social Security Fund, current estimates show that in 2032, the fund is not nearly as solvent as it needs to be. We need to find ways as Republicans and Democrats to sit down, prioritize spending to keep our promises. Medicare is especially difficult because we have so many baby boomers coming into the system and they're needing that higher level of skilled care. It costs $10,000 to stay at the West Point nursing home a month, and that's a normal charge. We have to find transparency, we have to encourage choice, and we have to make sure that quality is there.
Thank you, Congressman. Senator, same question, Social Security and Medicare.
Let's be honest, Congress has known for 2 decades that we were going to have the silver tsunami and that those people that were paying into Social Security were going to be aging out and utilizing Social Security. Those people with higher incomes, while people with lower incomes would be paying into it. And what did Congress do? Nothing. Congressman Flood sits on the committee, the Senatorial Research Committee, that has put out information in reference to changing Social Security. So let's be honest with that. We know that had Congress raised the minimum wage to keep up with inflation, that we would not even be having this discussion. One easy way to make sure that we protect Social Security is by raising the minimum wage. We also know that the wealthy do not pay their fair share. Just by raising the cap by 5%, it will only affect 6% of all Americans and make sure that our fund is solvent. I do not think that this benefit that is owed to hardworking Nebraskans should be changed past age 70.
Thank you. Congressman, an opportunity to rebut. Obviously, she talked about your committee.
Well, I'm not sure what committee she's talking about, maybe the Republican Study Committee, of which I'm affiliated with. What I would say here is that what you just heard my opponent say is more taxes and a higher minimum wage. The higher you go on the minimum wage, the more everything else costs. The more it costs to go through the drive-thru at McDonald's. The more it costs when you go to Walmart. The more it costs when you go to your local hardware store. Businesses can't accept these mandates from the federal government. If anything, minimum wage should be a state issue as it relates to where it's at right now. Look at what's happening in California. She talks about raising the minimum wage. There's a lot of services that are no longer available because people just can't make any money doing it. At the end of the day, to get out of this mess, we have to grow the economy. More taxes, more mandates, that doesn't work. That doesn't work for Americans, and that doesn't work for Nebraskans.
Senator, same courtesy. Your rebuttal.
I'm actually enjoying this because Senator Flood actually was against stopping unfunded mandates in Nebraska. So when he uses that word, it makes me giggle. You know, we know that raising the minimum wage is not what he says because we've done it in Nebraska. The voters decided to do that. Instead, what we have is a very healthy economy, except for the depression that our farmers are now going into and the farm bill not being done. And it also allows people to pay their fair share. It's not more taxes. It's not a burden on the businesses because we've already proven that in our state and other states that have raised the minimum wage. And we also know that when people make more money, they spend it locally. God forbid we should want to lift up the middle class because right now, folks, the middle class is disappearing. This has nothing to do with taxes. This has nothing to do with closing down businesses because we've already got a track record right here in our own state that shows differently.
Thank you, Senator. Moving on, taking a look at national security. Now we have a question from the Lincoln Journal-Star. Chris?
What or who poses the greatest threat to our national security? Senator Blood, let's start with you.
I think that's a very long list. We know that when it comes to Nebraska specifically, we have to worry about agri-terrorism. We know that we have not made any movement forward to protect our environment, to protect our farmers, to protect our water sources. We also know with technology that that's a whole nother issue when it comes to terrorism. When it comes to countries right now, I think one of our greatest threats is Russia. We want to make sure that we stay on a stage where we show that we are powerful and that we have a military that will respond as necessary. But what we're doing right now, and with the previous president, we found that we were trying to play nice with Russia. Meanwhile, they invade other countries. They affect everything that we do in this country when it comes to security and safety, and it affects our economic recovery from the pandemic. We need to make sure that whatever we do is that we protect ourselves from Russia. We're not there to be their friends. They have been somebody, along with China, that we need to keep on the sidelines for a very long time.
Thank you, Senator. Congressman, same question, national security.
China. China is the biggest threat to the superpower status of the United States. They now have a navy bigger than ours. They are building a nuclear triad that will be bigger than the one we have today. They wake up every single day and they use espionage and cyber attacks to target Americans. They work their way into systems like Huawei, and they end up on cell phone towers in Nebraska near our ICBM fields, able to listen in and collect data. They run a spy balloon right over Offutt Air Force Base. They are bold. They are working to dislodge us as the superpower, and they want to be the sole superpower by 2050. And what did they see in President Biden with the withdrawal from Afghanistan? They saw weakness. So did Vladimir Putin. That's why he went to Ukraine. Yes, Russia is a problem, but their economy is similar to that of Texas. China is a juggernaut, and they want the end of America.
Thank you, Congressman. A real quick follow-up for both of you. We'll start again with Senator Blood. Talk a little bit, if you can, about national security spending priorities. Both of you are vying for a district that includes Offutt Air Force Base. Talk a little bit about what you would prioritize with national security spending.
Well, I have a very long track record of supporting both our veterans and military families, and Offutt Air Force Base is very important to me. I'm really concerned about the recent letter that my opponent wrote to the Pentagon in reference to ignoring issues that pertain to the climate change, because we know that climate change is affecting the missions at Offutt Air Force Base, according to the 55th Wing Commander. And so I want to make sure that we continue to give the military the tools that they need. We need to make sure that not only do we take care of the military and the tools that they need, but we also take care of the military families, because they also serve. And so we know it's always going to be part of our budget. It's always something that we have to take seriously. And if you've ever been to the Boneyard, you know that we still don't support our military in a way that it really should happen, because we are constantly taking parts off older planes and older equipment and putting them on the current equipment that they have. We know that we can do better, and we've not done that in decades.
Thank you, Senator. Congressman, same question, national security spending priorities.
Well, I want to start by saying that it goes without saying that Senator Blood has been a champion for Bellevue and Offutt Air Force Base. She cares deeply about that. Where I depart from her comments are that the Green New Deal needs to stay out of our military. This effort to make everything woke, to push the Green New Deal into every nook and cranny of our fighting force, takes our attention away from adversaries like North Korea, China, Russia. That being said, we are in a very dangerous world right now. We have to make sure that our allies in Ukraine have the weapons they need to fend off the Russians, that Israel has our support in the Middle East, and that the people living in Taiwan know that we're there. The South China Sea is a very dangerous place right now. China is looking to advance into Taiwan and create a conflict that would be catastrophic. Americans have to be ready for this, and that means supporting our military is a top priority.
Thank you, Congressman. Nebraska Public Media will ask the next question on artificial intelligence. Cassidy?
Artificial intelligence is taking on a bigger role every day. How would you write federal law about AI to encourage its potential but minimize its risks? Let's begin with Congressman Flood.
Well, thank you very much for the question. I'm actually on an AI subcommittee discussing this as it relates to our financial services sector. I think artificial intelligence has the ability to do things that are great. Let me give you an example, and then I'll give you a concern I have. One of the examples is that if you grant access to a bank to look at your data in your bank account, they will see that you pay your cell phone bill on time, that you pay your rent on time, and that you generally do a good job. And that artificial intelligence can make a decision about your credit worthiness. Right now, there's too many Americans that are underbanked or not banked because they have no credit. I think artificial intelligence opens up credit to a lot of people to allow them to buy their first home or to get that consumer good or that car. The concern I have about artificial intelligence is that it can be used with certain biases to violate federal law as it relates to discrimination. And I'll use my time in the rebuttal, if any, to kind of unpack that. But I think there's good and bad, and I'm glad we have that discussion.
Senator, same question. What would you do about AI?
So I have been talking about AI, robots, cobots, and blockchain for 8 years because that is our future. But it's been made clear that we have a lot of people that are making decisions at every level of government about AI and other forms of technology without having a clear understanding of how they work. And so whatever we do when we move forward with AI is that we have to remember that there is a danger. The more that we utilize AI, the more dangerous it becomes because AI works on information. And so do I think it's a good thing for many people? I do. But do I also think that we need to change laws? I absolutely do. But I believe that the laws that they are changing when it comes to technology at both the federal and the state level lacks a real knowledge of how it works. And so if we want to change legislation, we've got to start educating the bodies that make the policy.
Thank you, Senator. And both of you seem to have a little bit more that you wanted to say on this topic. It's a complicated one. Congressman, you want to start us off a little bit?
Well, I totally agree with Senator Blood. It is complicated, and to make policy, you have to understand what's going on. And so I have been reading up on this, I have been studying it, and I've been in a number of hearings. Here's what concerns me about artificial intelligence. Let's just look at it in the securities industry. If every major trader in America has the same AI data in their black box, do all of them start trading the same? Do our markets function the same way? So I think two things here. Number one, our prudential regulators have to have the financial resources to hire the right people that can work both in technology and regulation to ensure the American public is protected. And number two, if you're going to engage and use AI, we're going to need to be able to see your work. You have to show us that you're not disproportionately disenfranchising people because of race, creed, color, gender. These are important issues, and I think the more we invest in AI, the more we need to put together a framework. And remember, let's build a good foundation, but let's not build a house with everything done, because innovation works too fast and our law needs to be able to keep up.
Thank you. Senator?
So when it comes to technology, Congressman Flood and I have always been very like-minded and discussed it on the floor of the legislature. But what I cannot stress enough is that we have known for a very long time that AI was coming. And everybody waits in Congress and everybody waits in the legislature until AI became a problem. We need to get ahead of technology. We know that other things are coming down the pike, and that we will have the opportunity to maybe put some really good legislation forward. Now, what I don't support is government overreach, which it kind of sounded like a little bit of government overreach. Well, they have to show us what they do. So I believe that we can set the parameters. We can make sure that we set laws that protect the public, but also set the guidelines of how we would like to see it utilized. We do not need to have government overreach. What we need to do, again, is have an understanding of how things work and what is best for the American public.
Thank you, Senator. KRVN will now ask the next question about agriculture policy. Dave?
The value of agricultural exports has been steadily decreasing over the past couple of years. What could you do to help prod either presidential candidate to focus on that area? Senator Blood, you will answer first.
Well, it's time to be honest. We know that Nebraska farmers lost $2 billion with the Trump tariffs. We know right now that the Farm Bill that helps create a safety net and helps our farmers is not only not finished, but it has been passed in the House in a way that the Senate will clearly not move it forward, and we will have to extend it for yet another year. The Farm Bill is done every 5 years. There's already been an extension. It's not being done. We're worried about China and Brazil and other countries. Then we should be getting the Farm Bill done to help protect the farmers and help them do the jobs that they need to do. We can continue to work with organizations like the corn growers who are reaching out to other countries to help find different outlets for our corn farmers to go ahead and export their goods, because we know with the loss of ethanol use that we have to find other ways for corn to be utilized so our farmers don't lose any income. But I go back again to the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill's job is to make sure that our farmers do well because they feed this nation. They can't even get the Farm Bill completed because they can't agree on anything.
Thank you, Senator. Congressman, same question of agricultural exports.
Well, first of all, this year, under the Biden administration, we have a $32 billion trade deficit. $32 billion trade deficit in ag products. The year before, it was $16 billion. We need new markets. We need new markets for our grain. I talked to Congressman Smith from the Nebraska's 3rd District. He's the subcommittee chairman of trade on the Ways and Means Committee. We know that needs to happen. And right now, our white corn is not being accepted by countries like Mexico because of some trumped up reason that's not based in science or reason. And President Biden won't stand on any podium and call them to account. What do you think other countries in the world say when our own president won't go to bat for our own farmers? As far as our Farm Bill, the House has passed it, and I support it, and it was bipartisan. Meanwhile, the Senate doesn't agree that we want to address the Prop 12 issue from California in our Farm Bill, and they're sitting there on the other side, folding their arms, waiting for us, I guess, to have another Congress, the 119th Congress? I don't know. I'm frustrated. Ask Chuck Schumer in the Senate why that is not on our table.
Thank you, Congressman. Now another question about some news happening this week involving gun violence. We have had a string of school shootings nationally, including a student shot at an Omaha high school this week. Talk about what role Congress should play, if any, in keeping our schools and shared public spaces safer from gun violence. Congressman Flood, you will begin.
Well, first of all, what happened at Omaha Northwest was hard to see and hard to watch. Nobody wants anything like that to happen. I believe very strongly in making sure that our schools and communities have the money they need to make sure we have the right amount of security at our schools. I've worked with the Sheriff's Department in Cass County. I've worked with small and large police departments across the 1st District to get them access to COPS grant funding so they can have that school resource officer, not just in the school, but also at events later in the day. As far as mental health, I think that's part of this. I've been an advocate for making sure we have a continuum of care in mental health, not just adolescent and adult, but community-based, residential, even locked, secure care for those that need it. At the end of the day, though, I want to talk about the Second Amendment. I'm not interested on infringing on any Nebraskan Second Amendment rights. And I think we have to keep that in mind because that is a right afforded to the citizens that came through the Bill of Rights, and it is a core value of mine.
Thank you. Senator, same question. Gun violence.
So I actually agree with Congressman Flood in reference to it being a constitutional right. In fact, I'm a gun owner myself. But here's the deal. We are sick and tired of our children being killed by gun violence. Thoughts and prayers are not enough. And so when we talk about gun violence, the thing we always hear is mental health. Now, my friend here has gotten together with the delegation from Nebraska, and they are going to be having a hearing on mental health and loneliness since the pandemic. Instead of actually passing bills for mental health, because we have peer-reviewed information that's available in the Journal of Medicine, they're just going to talk about it. We can't keep talking about mental health, not funding it, not making it better, and we certainly can't keep passing on this excuse. Our children are more precious than the gun rights. I support the Second Amendment. We have to find ways to protect our children. We constantly hear about security. I have a red light, so I will hopefully finish on a follow-up.
Thank you. We'll give you both a little time on this issue. It's complex on rebuttal. Go ahead.
Well, my opponent may have mischaracterized my record on mental health. I have been an advocate for increasing funding. I voted for Medicaid increases for behavioral health providers. In 2009, I established the Behavioral Health Education Center at the University of Nebraska Medical Center to get more practitioners into rural areas of the state. I managed, from the legislative side, a transition of the Norfolk Regional Center into community-based care. My mom, as I grew up, was a psychiatric nurse that checked on folks' medicines to make sure they were tracking okay, and my dad was a guardian for people that had mental health issues as a trust officer. This is an important issue to me. I do not like to see people that are mentally ill in our jails. And unfortunately, since our regional center transition, we've seen our jails fill up. Lincoln Regional Center is full. Senator Blood knows how dangerous it is there, but the mental health has to be funded, and I think Nebraskans support that.
Thank you, Congressman. Senator, same courtesy.
Nebraskans absolutely support mental health and us supporting mental health, but what they don't support is their children being murdered. And so we can talk about things like safe storage. Most gun owners that I know are responsible gun owners. They wouldn't give a child for their 14th birthday an automatic weapon. Most gun owners I know, that if they have a family that has a mental health issue, they're going to seek help, even though it's harder to find help, for that person. The problem is that we're not doing anything. What we keep doing is talking about mental health. We keep talking about thoughts and prayers and how sad it is and how horrible it is that these children are being murdered. But let's get down to brass tacks. Children being murdered on a daily basis has become the norm. And until we take action at the congressional level and not a patchwork of laws across the United States, we will never solve this problem.
And now we move on to another question from the Lincoln Journal-Star about student debt. Chris?
According to the U.S. Department of Education, more than 250,000 Nebraskans are holding a total of $7.9 billion in student loan debt. A federal judge recently blocked President Biden's latest attempt to offer some help to borrowers. What should the federal government do, if anything, to help borrowers finding it difficult to get out of debt? Senator Blood will start us off.
You know, let's be honest about student debt. What we know is that much of the loans that were given to students were predatory. We know that there are people that have paid above and beyond what their student loans actually were, instead paying interest over and over and over again. I talked to people who've been paying on student loans for decades, that most of them will die without those loans even paid off. Now, we looked at the pandemic, and a lot of the people that have been against helping these people with their student loans were people that got forgivable loans during the pandemics for their businesses. I don't understand how so many people blame the student for taking out the loans and not the predatory practice that made those loans create and generate huge amounts of interest. That is beyond me. I think when we talk about the student loans, the government needs to start doing some real addressing when it comes to the interest that it charged on these loans. And actually, I believe in forgivable loans when we have people in our state especially that educate and work here in place.
Thank you, Senator. Congressman, same question, student loans.
Well, this is the first time I've heard this discussion about predatory lending. It's another attempt to evade accountability. There are a lot of young people, there are a lot of students, they come out of high school, they look at their options and they decide whether they want to go to a college that costs $30,000, $10,000, $5,000, $2,500 a semester. A lot of people choose community college. A lot of people take 2 jobs. I paid on my student loans for 2 decades. They're finally paid off. But this idea that we can wipe away student debt, it isn't free, people. It's $5 billion a month. And after the Supreme Court told President Biden he couldn't do it, what did he do? He went around the back end. And now they're putting their finger down on the loan processors like they're the culprits. Well, I can tell you what, there's thousands of people in the 1st Congressional District that are in loan collection every day for student loans, and they aren't the problem. The problem is the Biden administration and Democrats that think this should be another free service that should just go away because they say so.
Quick rebuttal, Senator.
Well, there he goes again, pointing fingers at President Biden. This is a long-term issue that happened way before President Biden. And again, both Congressman Flood and I are very aware of the businesses that took loans during the pandemic that they did not have to pay back. So when we talk about responsibility, I didn't see any of these businesses rushing to pay those loans back. I know one big company in Nebraska that took those loans whose daughter went out and bought a Maserati because they were struggling and it was so hard during the pandemic. I think that we have a certain law or rule for people with wealth and a certain rule for people without wealth. And we need to meet in the middle and figure out what that is. Because yes, college is expensive. And to be really frank, a 4-year college degree is not a pathway for many, and we should start considering the trades more often. But there is more that can be done because there are predatory loans that many of these children that were 18 took, and they didn't know what it was going to result in.
Thank you, Senator. Congressman, same courtesy.
Why should plumbers and carpenters and nurses work their tails off to pay off the loans of doctors and lawyers and accountants? It makes no sense. Go down to the Casey's in any one of these small towns and stand in the parking lot and find out if they think that makes sense. It doesn't. At the end of the day, we have to look at our student loan system and we have to say either we enter repayment or we continue to write a check out of the general fund for money we don't have. We're $35 trillion in debt for $5 billion a month. This problem didn't start decades ago. In fact, our repayment was working just fine. COVID hit. There was a change. But what happened? President Biden came in. I'm sorry, Senator Blood, it's an inconvenient truth, but it is true. President Biden, with the wave of a wand, illegally wiped out student debt. The Supreme Court said no, and now he's going around their back. That doesn't sound like following the law to me. It's not good for America.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next question comes from Nebraska Public Media News, and it deals with election security. Cassidy?
What steps, if any, should be taken to help more Americans believe their elections are secure and to revive a national belief in a peaceful transfer of power? Congressman Flood, we'll start with you.
Well, first of all, I supported voter ID in Nebraska. I signed a petition. I was vocal about it when I was in the legislature, and I'm very glad that it passed. It's hard to have a democracy if people don't respect the results of an election. And that is very important. And I think we have a court system that takes those complaints and uses and applies the rules of evidence and then makes a decision. Our elections in Nebraska are safe. Bob Evnen, our Secretary of State, and county election officials across Nebraska, together with poll workers and our voter ID system, have done a good job. But the state of Virginia just found several thousand illegal immigrants that were on the rolls, and they kicked them out. We're having a discussion right now in Congress about the SAVE Act being attached to the continuing resolution. Why is it so hard for some people to say illegal immigrants can't vote? That is the law already. Illegal immigrants shouldn't be able to vote. They shouldn't vote. That undermines our system of election integrity in America.
Thank you, Congressman. Senator, same question.
So Nebraska has taken steps forward to ensure that voter ID is happening because they feel that that would make our elections safer. But what I fear and what I see us doing is making it harder for people to vote, and it is your right to vote, especially for our seniors, who many did not have driver's license and now have to find ways to get picture IDs, people with disabilities. I think it's really unfortunate that we made it more difficult for people to vote. I am not saying that I don't support the voter ID. I'm saying that we should have worked harder to make it easier for folks that can vote and allow them to vote. It's clear that it's another scare tactic. Undocumented immigrants are not voting, period. He's right. Nebraska's voting system is secure, is safe. Bob Evnen is doing a good job, as were the previous people in his position. But what we do need to address are when countries like Russia get involved and affect our elections.
Thank you. Both of you have talked a lot about wanting to represent Nebraskans, but what steps would you take, each of you individually, to try to represent Nebraskans that maybe don't agree with you politically? Start with Congressman Flood.
Well, what I have been doing, I am having town halls. I've had probably 6 town halls since I became a member of Congress. I've held one annually in Lincoln. I think that's important because this is our state's largest city. I've been in Sarpy County, Fremont, Norfolk. I meet with folks regardless of their party, and just like I'm sure every state senator does as well. I pride myself on good constituent services, and I try to be as present as I can. The benefit that I have is I have 2 kids in high school sports, and so a lot of the towns that they play, I'm in their town, you know, on a Friday night, even when I'm not in an official capacity, learning about North Bend or Schuyler or Battle Creek. There are so many ways to be out there, but I think when it comes to representing a congressional district, you work with the people that are representing the cities. I work well with the mayor of Lincoln. I work well with folks across the district that are in large and small cities, and I pride myself on good constituent services. And so I think that's what I've done, and that's what I'll continue to do.
Thank you, Congressman. State Senator?
And so I actually echo much of what Congressman Flood said. I have been very visible in my community and would be very visible in Congressional District 1. One of the things that I have done that I'm not aware of any other elected official doing is that for the 16 years that I have served the public, we make constituent outreach calls. So for instance, for the legislature, we call and say, hey, this is Senator Blood or my staff. And we say, do you have any questions, concerns, or comments? Anything you'd like to talk about policy-wise, something that we can do better? And then we take that information and we do better. Once in Congress, I will do that very thing. We will call constituents on a monthly basis. And when we have our town halls and when we mail out information, we will not only send it to one party, but we will send it to everybody so they have the ability to come and share information and tell us how we're doing.
Thank you, Senator. We will now move to closing statements. Each candidate will have 2 minutes. We'll start with Congressman Flood.
Well, first of all, thank you again to our host and our moderator and everybody here at Nebraska Public Media. If you take one thing away from this debate today, I hope it's this. Our nation's future is on the line in November. The stakes have never been higher, and the choices on your ballot have never been starker. And the Democratic Party has never been more united in its extremism. Kamala Harris is the most radical liberal ever nominated for president by any party. She supports communist price controls, amnesty for illegal immigrants, trillions in more spending and taxes. She even wants to outlaw private health insurance. Make no mistake, my opponent, Carol Blood, has endorsed Kamala Harris, and she would be a rubber stamp for the Democrats in Washington. Earlier today, she said she's not partisan. While I was building a business with over 200 employees, she was working as a staffer for the Nebraska Democratic Party. She runs people's campaigns. Ladies and gentlemen, don't be fooled. She is a Democrat, and she is a proud Democrat, and she has worked for the Democratic Party, and that was her job. So here's the question. Are you better off today than you were before Joe Biden? Are you okay with the border? Are things working well in the economy? If so, I invite you to support my opponent. If you want it to change, if you want to get America back on the right track, then I would like to earn your vote. With that, I want to thank you once again for having us here today. To all the people that put this discussion together, may God bless you, may God bless Nebraska, and may God bless the United States of America.
Thank you, Congressman. Senator?
I too would like to thank everybody for allowing us into their households today so we could share a little bit of what we believe and what we stand for. And I want to thank Congressman Flood for explaining to you why you need to vote for me, because the hyper-partisanship is strong. I am not identified by a party, but Congressman Flood clearly is. I'm identified by being a Nebraskan, born and raised. Did I work for the Democratic Party? I did. What I did was I helped train candidates so candidates wouldn't waste money on high-price lobbyists, on high-price people to run their campaigns, because I believe in paying it forward. It has nothing to do with our party. It has to do with helping people. Do I help run women's campaigns? I do, because I know what it's like to be off on your own and have nobody help you. So God forbid I have compassion for my fellow man and I go to help people with their campaigns because it's the right thing to do. I'm a Nebraskan. I help people. I don't believe in hyperpartisanship. You can keep talking about Kamala Harris. I don't know her personally, and I didn't think she was standing here debating Congressman Flood. What I do know is that I have a long history of getting things done. I am tenacious. I do my research, and I represent all Nebraskans, and my track record shows that. I don't listen to the vocal minority. I don't talk about weird party stuff where somebody, because they belong to a party, believes one certain thing and puts one person on a pedestal and makes them a god. No, I work for you. I'm available to you, not my staff, Senator Blood, Congresswoman Blood. I believe we can do better. We've got to stop putting people in that put politics over the people. You got to start electing people that are like you. People that know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck. People that know what it's like to have to send our kids to school and worry about if they're going to come home or not. With that, I just again thank you, and I agree. God bless Nebraska and God bless America.
Thank you. And that will do it for this debate between State Senator Carol Blood and Congressman Mike Flood. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for watching. Early voting starts next month, and Election Day is November 5th. If you came away from this debate with any further questions, we encourage you to read, watch, or listen to any of our partners involved. Have a great day.